Hey, Brian, it's Kirsten. I made you co-host. Oops, I can't hear you. I
I'm
think you're
I'm muted.
muted.
So
All right.
thank you, and it's nice to hear your voice. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Sunburned. It was 80 to 90 degrees the whole time I was in Arizona.
Was it a good trip?
It was wonderful.
Good.
Yeah, had a great time. It was really nice being able to see my folks after 2 years.
Yeah, I bet. How are they doing?
They're doing well. They're getting old. Reminds me I'm getting old.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah, but they're doing well. Thanks for asking.
Good.
We are all ready to go on this end. So when you're ready, I guess when it gets to 11 o'clock, we're ready to go.
Okay, thanks. John, can you hear me? Hey, John, are you able to hear me? Or maybe a question for Kirsten also.
Oh yeah, I can hear you just fine, Brian.
Kirsten, do you happen to know, I know this is probably, I think my question was just answered. I was just wondering if we got Ellen and Aaron Zoom invites, but Ellen has.
Yeah.
Great.
Ellen has an invite. Erin's going to use the link at the top of the agenda, so she might come as an attendee and we'll have to elevate her.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
I'm just down the hall, so I can find Kristen.
Track me down.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirsten.
You're welcome.
Is this your last meeting, Kirsten?
I think so. Next week's my last week in the clerk's office. If we have Cow next week, I'll be back at Cow, but I don't think we have anything planned.
I don't think we do either.
But you can still find me. I'll just be down in the basement.
Well, at least there are windows down in the basement over there.
This is true. We have no windows in the clerk's office.
We have no windows in MRA.
Oh yeah. You have a great sunlight though in the hallway.
Yeah.
Brian, I just wanted to remind you that I need to leave at 11:30. I just want to make sure we have a quorum still.
Sorry, that's not allowed. We will be issuing Zoom restraints and keeping you there.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, it might look like this.
No problem.
I'm
I-
right
I-
behind you at 11:40.
Yeah. I'm not going to try to keep Ellen because we talked. Okay. People are rolling in here. Why don't we, Kirsten, if you could go ahead and put up those slides for virtual participation.
Just a second. I knew I was forgetting something. And the slides. There we go.
I'm getting to the right meeting on my screen. Bear with me. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, or late morning. I will call Committee of the Whole to order for today, Wednesday, April 21st. We're continuing to meet virtually. If you'd like to participate, we have our standard ways to do that. If you're participating in the webinar, you can raise and lower your hand. As a participant, you can also do so by clicking more on an iPhone or Android phone. And if you're using a landline, you can do *9 to raise or lower your hand. And as always, outside of the meeting, you can contact us at the City Council voicemail, 552-6012, or at the council email, council@ci.missoula.mt.us. We will begin with roll. Would you mind calling roll?
Okay, just a moment, please. There we go. Anderson.
Present.
Becerra.
Present.
Contos.
Here.
Hart.
Present.
Hess.
Present.
Jones.
She's absent.
Okay. Merritt.
Present.
Ramos.
Present.
Cheryl.
Present.
Asika.
She's out.
She's out. Von Lossberg is here, and West.
Present.
Great.
Great, thanks. We have minutes from April 7th to approve. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Not seeing anyone in the attendees list for public comment. And so we'll move right into our agenda. We have one agenda item today. It's a resolution pertaining to Burlington, Missoula proposed cleanup plan, the DEQ cleanup plan. And it's a referral and resolution co-sponsored by myself and my ward mate, Heidi West, for Ward 1. And without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to John Adams.
Thanks, Brian. My name is John Adams. I am the Brownfields Administrator in the Housing Division of CPDI. And I'm going to share my screen and show you some slides. So the Burlington Northern Missoula facility was designated a state Superfund site in 1994 by the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ, due to diesel fuel discharge associated with the 2 fueling locations they have in the downtown rail yard. So the facility, as DEQ calls it, encompasses not just the rail yard, but any area that may have been impacted by contamination at the rail yard. So the expansive boundary you see here is largely due to the migration of petroleum via groundwater underground. So to be clear, there are no wells drawing water from the contaminated areas. So properties adjacent to the rail yard within this boundary should not be affected by the historical spills. So surface soil contamination. So there's groundwater contamination, then surface soil contamination is the other big problem at the site. And that's basically just from a century of industrial use at the rail yard. So I first want to say that based on testing of the soil at adjacent properties, DEQ does not believe that there have been any impacts to the surface soil of neighboring properties. City County Health, in their comments on the proposed plan, has asked DEQ to review that data and just be very sure. But DEQ's belief is that there's no problem anywhere except at the rail yard. But within the rail yard's boundaries, testing indicates that there are PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and lead present in the surface soil. And both are low enough that DEQ would permit commercial or industrial use on the property, but high enough that DEQ would not permit residential development within the rail yard. So after decades of testing and DEQ approved efforts by BN to pull the petroleum contamination out of the ground and groundwater, DEQ has provided its proposed plan to finish cleanup at the site. And what happens here is that DEQ selects the remedy for the site and BN implements and pays for it. The proposed plan is available online and at the Mansfield Library, and comments must be postmarked by May 2nd, postmarked no later than May 2nd, or received by email no later than May 2nd. DEQ's proposed plan on groundwater is essentially attenuation of remaining issues by circulating air through the affected subsurface areas. Essentially, DEQ believes BN has already recovered what's most easily retrieved, and that with some help from bioventing, natural depletion will cleanse the groundwater in about 20 years. And DEQ's proposed plan on surface soil is simply to record deed restrictions on the property, prohibiting the use of the rail yard for housing. So the way DEQ arrives at cleanup levels is by determining what reasonably anticipated future uses of the facility will be. And the criteria for that are dictated by Montana statute. DEQ is required to look at local land use regulations, historical and anticipated uses of the facility, patterns of development in the immediate area, and relevant indications of anticipated land use from the owner of the facility and local planning officials. And uses is plural here. As we've seen at White Pine Sash, DEQ could recognize that different parts of the rail yard may have different future uses. DEQ concluded that future uses would be confined to commercial industrial uses. City staff and the mayor's office, consistent with this resolution, believe that these criteria compellingly point toward future residential use of large portions of the rail yard. And to speak more on that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Aaron Pahan.
Thanks, John. Go ahead, Aaron.
Good afternoon, Erin Pahan with Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. This council is well educated on the need for housing at all price points and all types of housing in our community. A report from the Missoula Organization of Realtors put in 2020 that price point for median single-family homes at just under $338,000, which is beyond the reach of most Missoulians. And our multifamily housing rate, which are rental homes in our community, the vacancy rate for those continues to hover around 1%. Missoula and the city council has invested a lot of time and community energy into our efforts to confront this challenge. That occurred through the passage of A Place to Call Home, our community-wide housing policy, which has mapped out our efforts to increase the rate of development of market rate housing and affordable housing, while devoting some of our resources to helping our most disadvantaged Missoulians find safe and affordable rentals or level up into the homeownership market. So we're working hard to implement those changes. And I know you recently received an update on our efforts from our Affordable Housing Trust Fund Administrator, Emily Harris Shears. But a big part of that effort is simply creating more supply, which makes it possible for the market to respond to the clear demand for more housing in our community. We aren't keeping pace with our development needs. In 2020, 554 homes were permitted. That's about 200 less per year than our peaks of 2016 and 2017, although it is slightly more than we produced last year. One of the most prominent barriers to increasing supply and the availability of homes in our community is simply the availability of land on which to build in a constrained valley like ours, which is surrounded by rivers and mountains, and also the resulting cost of land when that land becomes too scarce. Most of the rail yard is zoned what's called M1R2, which permits commercial, light industrial, and residential uses by right. It's quite common to see high density residential development in commercial zoning and in M1R2 districts. In fact, in the past 6 years, 320 new homes have been constructed in M1R2 zoning districts across the community. That makes up almost 9% of our total new residential units or homes in the same time frame. The M1R2 zoning designation runs through the central core of the city and was originally established as zoning that was adjacent to the old rail line. We see this throughout the north side, west side neighborhood area as well. According to that designation, that zoning occurs in areas that are most desirable for redevelopment because they're central, close to services, utilities, established infrastructure. They help us meet our transportation goals, our climate action and energy conservation goals, and many others. Because the M1R2 zoning classification is currently being used for residential development, the city recommends that we don't support limiting that option for future residential development. That's especially true given the challenges that we have in providing opportunities for housing, which we already discussed. So that M1R2 zoning area doesn't just merely permit residential activity. By design, the district is intended to promote residential uses alongside commercial uses. And this map really highlights the desire for housing in proximity to the rail yard. This is a desire that already exists today. So proximity to the rail yard does not detract from both the desire and the pressure to provide more housing downtown. This map shows the area within 100 feet of the Burlington Northern facility boundary. And this figure shows that between 2016 and 2020, 27 residential building permits for homes were approved on the doorstep of the rail yard. So that desire for housing and that proximity to the rail yard is very real. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Buchanan.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, good morning, Council. I'm going to talk a little bit about the downtown master plan and the kind of importance and standing of those considerations in that document for the city of Missoula. And the slide you have in front of you is the kind of illustrative representation of what might happen in the rail yard per the current downtown master plan. This plan was adopted in 2019, 10 years after its predecessor was adopted. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But what you'll see here is that the plan recognizes that the rail yard is probably our last best, biggest opportunity to provide housing in the downtown, where services and infrastructure are already pretty much available, and certainly services are. We've got a lot of parking lots in the downtown, but nothing that can impact housing in the order of magnitude that the rail yard can. So this plan has a very aggressive and ambitious plan for development of green space, possibly community center, but and mixed use, but primarily residential with some pretty serious density reflected there. And one of the things that I think is important to note, and we will do this in our correspondence with DEQ, is that in Missoula, the downtown master plan is not just one of those planning documents that sits on a shelf somewhere. This is the second version of the downtown master plan. And John, if you want to flip to the 2009 version, you'll see that it's very similar. The configurations are a little bit different, but once again, that area was identified as the roundhouse area. And it is primarily consists of residential with some green space and connection into the downtown. That plan was adopted as part of the growth policy in 2009. The current plan has been adopted by you as part of the growth policy in, I think, November of 2019. And one of the things that's unique about the downtown master plans, and I'll use plural here, is that we have had a downtown master plan implementation committee that has been in existence for probably 12, 13 years now, which is a group of very diverse citizens and representatives of various organizations who kind of look at different aspects of this plan. And we have literally met once a month for something like 12 years. The composition of that group changes as needs change and as desires change, but fundamentally, it is a group that is dedicated to the implementation of this plan. So this plan's real. It's just not a collection of pretty illustrations that our consultants can generate. One of the other things that's pretty unique about the downtown master plans, once again plural, is that rarely does anything happen in the downtown that the question isn't asked, what does the downtown master plan say about this? So I think, we will represent to DEQ, if council agrees with this approach, that this is a living, breathing document. And as you well know, as council, annually you get a report from the Downtown Master Plan Committee, Implementation Committee, kind of checking off the accomplishments that have occurred in the downtown as a result of this planning effort and the adoption of these two plans as part of the growth policy. So the desire to have housing there is real. The need to have housing there is real. This area has limited benefit to the city as an industrial site at this point, if only because of access. So I think there is a very strong argument to be made that this should be redeveloped as residential property with mixed use and open space included, which the current path that the state is on does not permit.
Thanks, Alan. John, did you have any other information, or I was planning to go to my colleague Heidi?
Post the resolution on screen if that's helpful, but other than that, I don't have anything more for you.
Great. Yeah, that would be helpful. So let me go ahead and recognize Heidi to talk a little bit about the resolution.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I would like to go ahead and get the recommended motion on the floor if that's appropriate.
Absolutely. That's great and is in order. Thanks.
All right, and I'll just briefly speak to it. I think that Aaron and Ellen and John just did a great job illustrating why this isn't an acceptable cleanup for this site. It's limiting this site to its history, and by that history, really, it's just the history that started in 1883 with the arrival of the railroad in the Missoula community, is really short-sighted, and it does not reflect the needs of our neighborhood, and it doesn't reflect the needs of the community overall. I hope that the rest of Council will support this resolution in support of a residential level cleanup. It really is the appropriate level of cleanup that is in line with the use on adjacent properties and the trends that we're seeing, as well as just the general needs of our community. We have an extreme housing crisis, and taking this land out of production essentially into perpetuity is just super short-sighted, especially when there is an opportunity to hold the responsible party responsible. And this is it's our one-time shot to get the entity that is responsible for the environmental impact to clean it up. With that, I'll just leave the motion on the floor and hope that we can get the DEQ to revise their decision.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. Several people queuing up. We'll go through that. I have a few things to add, but I will wait. Heather.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks everybody for this great presentation. I really do appreciate all the effort that has gone on for the last 12 years trying to get our heads wrapped around.
Hey, Heather, we're kind of losing your volume.
Can you hear me now?
We can, but it's pretty light.
How's this? Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your help on this. We definitely do have a housing crisis that we are facing. So I'm not a soil scientist. I ask this question from a point of ignorance. So when we are talking about the cleanup between the different levels of both residential and commercial, and when we are thinking about really trying to encourage more mixed use, does the DEQ end up looking at some kind of middling or hybrid level of cleanup because of that potential mixed use? Heidi is shaking her head no. All right. So I would assume then there's a lot more cost that's involved to try and get us to that level of residential. Is that correct?
John, do you want to speak to that or?
Sure. Cleaning up. So right now, what DEQ has proposed is that BN do nothing to the soil, and that costs $0.00. All they'd have to do is record a covenant restricting residential development, which should be not very costly. So to clean up the soil, they have different options like dig and haul or cap, and that would be more expensive. We don't really know how much because the feasibility study that they prepared imagined digging out the entire rail yard, which is unlikely to be what DEQ would request or require of them. So we don't really know how much it would cost, but yeah, it would cost BN some money.
Okay. And then I guess following up on that, is the proposal to do this before we have a developer build the properties? Is that right?
Right now, there's no plan. Right now, there is no developer who's trying to develop properties. Right now, BN and MRL say that their anticipated use of the properties is to continue as rail yards. So our position is that it is reasonable to anticipate that at some point in the future, that is going to change and that there will be residential development at the rail yard, and that the entity that caused the pollution should pay for the cleanup to enable that future use.
Okay. And then my final question, John. So will BN be able to utilize the Brownfields revolving loan fund in order to help with the cost of mitigation?
No. The EPA only allows you to use those, only allows entities that are not responsible for the pollution themselves to access those federal funds.
Okay, thanks for all those clarifications.
Thanks. I'm going to go out of order because Amber needs to leave, so I'm going to recognize Amber.
Thank you, and I apologize for skipping the line of questions here, but I wanted to just bring it to the council's attention that the health board saw this at our last meeting and approved sending a letter around this. One of the things that I did want to point out, and a question that I had, was around this level of contamination being in such a dense urban area, in such a windy area, and whether there was any risk when, you know, the different levels of cleanup or digging the topsoil up, if there was any health risk to our community around that being in the air. And kind of said, yeah, there could be, you know, so I just think that that's something that we need to consider. The other thing I would urge council to do, if they have any hesitation around this, is to go back and listen to the most recent Board of Health meeting, because Ross Miller, who was the board president, had some, I think, really had some interesting historical knowledge around issues like this coming up. He is a lawyer. And, you know, if we're chasing our tail on him, we're going to be left to holding the bag ultimately. So he said, now is the time to act with these. And I just really urge people to think about that, and also to listen to that. It's kind of a long Board of Health meeting because we had some other items, but toward the end, if you listen to that, I think Ross's comments are really appropriate and motivating for us to do something on the front end instead of wait and see what happens. So thank you. And I apologize, I need to leave the meeting early. I would absolutely be supporting this motion, but I'm guessing I'm not going to have a chance to do that.
Thanks, Amber. Julie.
Thanks. And I am in support of this motion. I agree with what Heidi has said, that it would be very short-sighted to just say what they've done is fine and we're good with that, and we're good with never being able to develop this into residential development in the future. It just would be very short-sighted of us. I think that the railroad owners and operators have been entities in the state of Montana and other states in the West that have just, everyone has had to be totally hands-off with them as entities. And because of the historical nature of their involvement with development across the West. And, you know, things change. And I think it's time that we start changing how we interact with some of these entities who have just been untouchable in the past. It is a spot that's in the middle of a lot of residential development, and allowing that contamination to just sit there and say, residents of the north side, you just get to live with this. It's not acceptable, in my opinion. So I fully support this motion.
Thanks, Julie. Next up, we have Mirta.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I too support this, the motion that we're going to have before us, I hope. I think it would be incredibly short-sighted. Our industries are changing, and we have seen the benefits of cleaning up brownfield sites to their full potential for housing, for residential use. We have seen that in our community, the mill site. We have seen it most recently with the White Pine Sash property on Scott Street. And we have seen what it can do when it's not cleaned up to residential standards. The infamous Love Canal in New York, which gave way to a lot of environmental regulations. I think it's incredibly important for our community to restore it to as close as possible to land that can be lived on, and that will not pose any health problems to our community. And also, I think that we are seeing now with the new administration at the national level, that there are national and federal incentives to be creative and be progressive in how we address the housing crisis that's before us. And I think that this is a perfectly good piece of land that someday could be the home of many Missoulians. So fully supportive, and thank you to my colleague Heidi West for bringing this up. I had not heard that this was being up for public comment until I heard from her. So thank you, Heidi, for keeping an eye on issues like these that affect our community.
Thanks, Mirta. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank you and Heidi for bringing this resolution forward. Obviously, as somebody who grows up in Libby, one of the largest Superfund sites in the world, I think that this is very important and something that I think is also a great thing that we can do to be proactive about affordable housing in the future. We know that we have an incredible shortage of supply right now, and I think that this is indeed a general role of government, as Mirta alleged and as Julie alleged. We don't really know if this is contaminating other people's property, therefore infringing on their rights. So I think that this is just the most responsible thing that we can do. We're certainly running out of space, and I'm certainly glad to see the city working with the Department of Environmental Quality, or at least encouraging them to do something like this, because I think it is something that is needed, and I certainly think that this is more effective than anything that we'll be able to do as far as subsidizing housing projects by increasing the supply. And this, I think, will have a greater impact on affordable housing in the future. Granted, this could be 10, 20, 30 years, but I have no doubt that eventually some things will change industrially, and the need for housing is just going to continue to grow. So I'm very supportive of this resolution. I want to thank Brian and Heidi for bringing this forward.
Thanks, Jesse. Jordan.
Yeah, I want to echo the comments so far. I really want to thank Brian and Heidi and for your work to bring this forward. I want to thank the DEQ for extending the comment period at the request of several city council members and others. I think that public comment is really challenging during the pandemic for a number of reasons, not least of which people are raising and educating children at the same time as trying to do everything else in their lives, and it's very difficult to participate right now. So that responsiveness is important, and I appreciate DEQ doing that. I am grateful for the work that staff have done. The work over the years on the downtown master plan. I mean, everything in our planning documents directs us toward residential uses being the most appropriate here. This is a consistent narrative that has been brought up since before the adoption of the 2008 downtown master plan, or whatever the specific adoption date of that was. So I mean, this is a decade and a half of this being the consistent policy position of the city of Missoula. I am grateful for the work on the resolution, and I look forward to supporting it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jordan. So we have a motion. I don't see additional hands. There's no public present for comment. I have several thank yous and just a couple comments. First off, I want to thank my colleague and friend Heidi for her work on this. Heidi and I met each other through our advocacy work around the White Pine Sash area, and it was where I was first learned of her amazing soil science skills, among many others. And I think it's worth stepping back for a moment and recognizing some of the parallels there, and just understanding that, you know, we had a site there at White Pine Sash. We had a proposed cleanup plan from DEQ that fell short, but I want to, as Jordan did, I want to thank DEQ, as he mentioned, for extending the comment period, but also during that experience with White Pine Sash for engaging the community and listening. They have a responsibility to do those things, but I think it's worth highlighting and recalling that the input that came from the city, from many sectors of the city, the council resolution, which was the first thing I worked on when I first got in council, and then lots of other comments that came in, for instance, from the health board and other entities within the city. They made a difference. And I think oftentimes, we can be frustrating at times to go through these experiences and feel like you can't make a change. And that plan changed. We had great leadership at DEQ. Tracy Stone Manning was the head of DEQ at that time. And I can recall some, challenging and heated, probably isn't too much of a stretch, meetings in the Jack Reedy room, among other places. And the plan changed, is the point I want to emphasize. And it didn't change for the entirety of the site, but it changed for half the site. And the housing project that is going in there now is going in there, because that plan changed, and thanks to a lot of other things. But that plan needed to change as one of the first steps. John Adams was one of the first people I met on council when I was working on that resolution. I'd like to think that I was, really good at writing that resolution, but anything that is good in that resolution is a result of the fact that I talked with John and listened to him. So I want to thank him for the help then. The resolution here looks very familiar to that resolution because they are very familiar. And really want to thank Heidi for her work and John for getting the details relative to the relative plans, the downtown master plan, the development, the residential development we've seen in that area properly inserted into it, and really highlighting the statutory. And I want to emphasize this: there's a statutory requirement for DEQ to look at anticipated future use. And that's one of the most important parts of the resolution back with White Pine Sash and the resolution now. Want to thank Aaron and Ellen for many things that they do, but for connecting and spelling out that nexus between housing and the downtown master plan elements, also housing related, to this area and to the resolution. The city is weighing in on this. I appreciate the administration doing that as well. And I'm sure I've missed some other important aspects and people, but really the things I wanted to emphasize are plans can change, and they can change when there's really solid input, based on the law and facts on the ground. And that's what this resolution embodies. So last chance for any other questions or comments. Heidi.
I just wanted to add Laval means she didn't get a direct thank you. She went through and pulled numbers and that we needed for this resolution. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Laval as well. My bad there. Thanks, Heidi. All right, with that, we've got a motion on the floor. We've had council comment, no public here for public comment. We'll have a roll call vote.
All right, on the motion, Anderson.
Yes.
Anderson votes yes. Becerra.
Yes.
Becerra votes yes. Contos. Is John still with us?
Hey, his video's not on and he's muted, so.
Okay. I will mark him as absent. Hart.
Yes.
Hart votes yes. Hess.
Yes.
Hess votes yes. Merritt.
Yes.
Merritt votes yes. Ramos.
Yes.
Ramos votes yes. Cheryl.
Chandler.
Oh, Cheryl left us. I'm sorry. Von Lossberg.
Yes.
Von Lossberg votes yes. And West.
Yes.
West votes yes. It looks like we have 8 yeses and 4 absent.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Much appreciated. This is near and dear to my heart, and I know Heidi's as well. So thank you. We have no other items, and we will be adjourned.